Welcome to the Police Accountability Report. I want you to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct, please email it privately to us at par@therealnews.com. And please like and share and comment on our video. I do read your comments and appreciate them. And of course, you can reach me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Facebook or Twitter. So as we said before, and we will say again, the point of this show is to hold the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. But what does that mean? It's a question that we continue to ask ourselves as it speaks to the purpose of the show. And it's something I want to address in detail because it was the very essence of what we do here that prompted a viewer criticism. That person said we gave too much time and attention to people who have had troubling experiences with the police, that we don't give the police enough time to counter the opinion of their victims. Well, fair enough. But this question reveals exactly why we produce this show and why we will continue to give people who have pushed back against police a voice. Consider our own police department here in Baltimore City. Like many across the country, it has multiple media relations specialists who do nothing but tell their side of the story and spend millions of dollars cultivating and shaping the message in their favor. In fact, there's probably no other political institution in the country which has such a cozy relationship with media than police departments. And I don't need to mention the plethora of cop shows and cop movies which depict police as heroic, always good actors protecting the public and enforcing the law without prejudice. And I'm not saying this isn't true sometimes, but we have to think, aren't there two sides to every story? And isn't it strange how much of the police perspective and law enforcement narrative dominates our media landscape? And who listens to and speaks for the people who question our country's ever-expanding law enforcement industrial complex? Does Nick Pettit, whose shoulder was dislocated after he filmed police slapping a teenager, have a spokesperson? Does Blind Justice, a blind veteran who was almost arrested on the 4th of July protesting for his First Amendment rights, have a team of PR specialists telling his side of the story? And does the family of Shali Tilson, who died of dehydration in prison, have the benefit of a sympathetic pop culture machine manufacturing positive propaganda for the mentally ill? No, and that's the point. Policing is a politically powerful institution with hundreds of millions of dollars of public money at their disposal to tell their side. The Real News is a donor-funded nonprofit that takes no corporate dollars, so perhaps it's only fair that we should dedicate our meager resources to tell the other side of the story, which is exactly what we will do today and continue to do, whether police partisans like it or not. Consider a recent development with, again, our own police department. For years, Baltimore City residents have had to fork over tens of millions of dollars in overtime to the department, despite the fact that crime continues to rise. And even after it was revealed that members of the now notorious Gun Trace Task Force, who robbed residents and dealt drugs, earned overtime while on vacation, nothing changed. But then recently, our new police commissioner, Michael Harrison, issued a new rule. And while it sounds unremarkable, it's what happened as a result that is revealing. Harrison said officers who were on disability or injury leave could not collect overtime. That's right. If you can't work as a cop, you can't get extra pay. But it's the response to this decision that is really noteworthy. Stephen, tell us what happened.
Well, as soon as Commissioner Harrison created this new rule within the agency that police officers who are on disability or an injury could not earn overtime, 25 officers suddenly declared themselves fit for duty, almost instantaneously, and thus qualify for overtime, which is an incredible thing to think about because, you know, injury, you have to go to a doctor, you have to get a certificate or an examination, and you are taken off the force, and not allowed to work in patrol or work in some of the more difficult jobs that police officers are supposed to do. And almost within days, those officers were suddenly healthy enough to earn overtime. So I think it kind of shows you where the incentives are in policing and how disingenuous it is that all this overtime is necessary.
Seems like an interesting coincidence.
Yeah.
So a city where schools don't have heat or air conditioning and abandoned houses swallow entire blocks, where crime continues to rise unabated, police officers who were suddenly unable to work found a miracle cure: overtime. That's right, extra money for their own pockets while our city struggles to survive. It's a point that reminds us about the underlying imperative of policing, and that is policing is a business. And it's a business that is growing in both size and number and shows no sign of abating. In 1992, when crime was at record levels, there were 779,000 police officers, or roughly 3 officers per 1,000 people. But as recently as 2012, when crime had allegedly dropped precipitously, the number of officers had actually risen sharply. sharply to over 1 million, and more importantly, 3.4 officers per person. It begs the question why? Why does policing continue to grow even as crime declines? And what are the consequences of this increase in policing for our civic rights and civic agency when more people with guns and badges are monitoring our lives? Now, nowhere is this growth in law enforcement more stark and more telling than in an area that would seem unlikely: schools. In 1997, only 10% of public schools had police officers, but in 2016, 42% of schools did. That has translated into over 80,000 police officers in public schools. And as we will see today, it has some troubling consequences. Part of this growth has been fueled by federal funding. Other factors include the belief that more police officers in school will lead to more safety. But there is another side to that coin, and it is a telling commentary on what happens when you flood communities with cops. In 2018, roughly 2.1 million juveniles were arrested for a variety of offenses. Many of these arrests occurred in schools, and as the videos we're about to show you suggest, more police may lead to more unnecessary arrests. Case in point is this video from Farmington, New Mexico, where school police officer Zachary Christensen is seen pinning an 11-year-old girl to the pavement. Allegedly, the child had taken an extra carton of milk without paying, but for reasons that have yet to be explained, the officer initiated an aggressive arrest.
Turn over! Turn over!
Do
not resist! Do not resist! Stop resisting!
All right,
Stop resisting!
Journey, please stop resisting.
Stop resisting!
Journey, just stop, hon.
Stop resisting!
Journey.
Stop!
I'm not going to use excessive force to get this done.
We're not excessive.
Yes, it is.
At this point.
Hey,
Leave me alone.
then stand up, hon.
Stand up.
Put your stuff in your bag. Here, stand up, Journey.
Leave me alone.
Hey,
I didn't.
here. Let me help you up. Hey,
No, I don't need your help. Leave me alone.
Go!
hey, Journey, don't
I'm
touch
not doing anything.
So, Stephen, what have police in Farmington said about this arrest, and how have they justified it?
Well, initially, Officer Christensen said that he had been assaulted by this 11-year-old, that her assault had prompted him to respond with force. But then a longer video cam footage emerged that showed that he had been berating her all day.
Yes.
It wasn't just about the milk, but that he had been criticizing her and threatening her with arrest throughout the entire day. And then the police department had to take a different sort of public position on that and said that he had perhaps had violated their procedures. And then eventually Officer Christensen on October 1st resigned because of this video cam. Because once it came out that he was just literally like following this kid around and harassing her.
Right.
It just became an
Didn't he
untenable...
actually threaten to arrest her for picking at the tape on a poster?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
He was,
It was very
obviously
extreme.
zeroed in on this child. And, you know, I think it shows, as you said before, how putting more police problematizes more things that are innocent children's behavior. Even if she did take a carton of milk, I mean, really, you're going to tackle her, throw her to the ground, you know, brutally over that? I mean, think of the trauma that would have in this child and the long-term lasting effects, which we know result from the use of force and arrests against children. It's really bad.
A recent story in the Washington Post recounted how cops swarmed a 19-year-old unarmed teen, guns drawn, who had not paid his fare. That's right. Over a half a dozen uniformed police officers acting as a de facto SWAT team, risking the life of the public and the teen to thwart a theft of roughly $2. Stephen, how are police justifying this?
Well, police initially said that someone had said this kid had a gun, but that proved to be wrong. They tried to say that he was armed. But how they're justifying is that they're having this big crackdown on, you know, quality of life crimes in the subway, and they're not going to let people jump turnstiles anymore because it obviously is a threat to public safety. Of course, it doesn't really take into account how they've defunded the subway system and let it fall into disrepair.
Right.
The point is that we need, you know, cops to actually chase people around for $2 with guns drawn. That, you know, if the officer, there's no more confined space in the subway car. The reason there's been so much outrage is that if a gun had went off, it's
Could have
more
injured
than likely
multiple people.
multiple people. You're packed in there like a sardine.
And you know, a lot of the problems, the quality of life issues that people want the police to address are actually out of the police hands. I think the problems, you know, are people with mental health illness that are untreated or homeless people in the subway. And aggressive policing really isn't the solution to those problems.
No, it didn't work here in Baltimore. We had zero tolerance where we arrested 100,000 people a year, and we now have the highest crime rate in the country. So no, it doesn't work.
So let's put this in perspective and perhaps use it to shed an uncomfortable light on the true imperatives of policing. Our massive law enforcement industrial complex couldn't criminally charge a single Wall Street executive for their undeniable role in one of the worst economic crises in this country's history, the Great Recession of 2008. Despite the loss of millions of jobs, billions of dollars, bailouts, not a single person went to jail. But police, acting as a de facto SWAT team, stormed into a subway car, guns drawn, over a $2 fare. Was this young man a threat to the public? Was he a menace worth risking the lives of passengers and bystanders to take down? Or was he something else, an easy and inviting target, a stat, a means to justify the ends, to keep the law enforcement industrial complex growing? That's because there's an aspect to the story which has not been reported that perhaps has more to do with this arrest than a simple need to keep people from riding the subway for free. Stephen, what aren't people seeing here?
Well, just recently, and this is amazing because we just talked about quality of life, the city hired 500 extra transit cops to, you know, man the subways and to, you know, prosecute just these kind of crimes. That is almost a doubling of the police force, or what is known as the MTA police, or the transit police, excuse me. So basically, they had just sort of hired all these people who kind of have to justify and to attack things like homelessness, they said. Homelessness, right? So you have poverty, you have a subway system in disrepair, you have people who can't afford to pay fares that have been going up exponentially to pay for all the repairs that politicians didn't do. And what do? You hire police. And then police, of course, all these extra police officers have to justify their time, right? They say, we're worthwhile, we arrested 20 fare jumpers, or we arrested 30 homeless people. And as you can see there you have policing monetizing itself, basically, justifying through stats and unnecessary arrests. It's just fortunate that someone didn't die, but it shows the extreme lengths that people go to, not just to empower police, but how police, their own self-justification can be very dangerous and can problematize and criminalize people who shouldn't be.
And so we wanted to end the show by responding again to the criticism that often comes with holding police accountable, that the police are the only barrier between us and mayhem, that only the police can stop violence, and only police are equipped to intervene when someone picks up a gun. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Let's watch Keenan Lowe disarm someone with a hug. Lowe is a football coach and security guard at Park Rose High School in Portland, Oregon. He had been tasked with finding a student who was supposedly making threats against his classmate, but instead of confronting the teen with guns drawn, this dramatic scene unfolded. Lowe disarmed him and then gave him a hug. I think this scene is illustrative of the consequences of our addiction to policing, a cautionary tale about what we give up when we put police on every corner and give them tanks to invade our communities. What we don't see, what is harder to measure, is the tangible loss of very human connections between each other, how the prevalence of policing turns people into suspects, poverty into a crime, and basic human pain into a pretext for state-sanctioned violence. What Lowe revealed to us in his act of kindness is how much the imperative to bolster and finance police separates us, how much it precludes us from seeking solutions to complex problems within ourselves. It demonstrates that policing must justify its existence by creating a pervasive sense of criminality. It must, as an institution, make us unsure of each other's humanity, so that the tools it uses to dehumanize seem not just acceptable, but warranted, which is why we create this show, to dispel that myth, to question the idea that killing people during a car arrest or arresting a tween for stealing milk is not just unacceptable, but an existential threat to our democracy, that the unfettered power of law enforcement does make us safer, but seeks to estrange us from each other, that policing cannot be held to account because we fear each other, fear engendered by the political power of an institution that has grown and flourished in cities like Baltimore while the residents suffer in silence. I want to thank investigative reporter Stephen Janis for his research and writing and for joining me here today. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. And please like, share, and comment. I do read your comments and I do appreciate them. My name is Taya Graham, and I want to thank you for joining me for the Police Accountability Report.